Told you about the efforts from the state of Maryland and Washington, D.C. to sue the president, accusing him of payments from foreign governments. Joining us now from Capitol Hill, Deputy Washington Bureau Chief for Time magazine, Alex Altman. His new cover story details how President Trump's Washington, D.C. hotel is raising an increasing amount of ethical concerns. And he writes in part this. This is the new town square in Donald Trump's Washington. Tourists perch on the blue velvet sofas in the lobby, snapping cell phone pictures as power players stream across the dark marble floors and cream carpets. In the past, presidents have often gone to great lengths to assure the public that they aren't mixing the nation's business with their own. Trump has taken a different approach. He has stepped away from the operations of his business, but he has not relinquished ownership. Critics say the approach falls far short. He is one great big example of exploiting public office for private gain, says Kathleen Clark, a law professor at Washington University in St. Louis, who trains governments around the world in ethics and anti-corruption practices. Of course, it's a scandal.
So, Alex, is this a guy that knows how to go right up to the line but never crosses it? Or do you think, in your investigating, that actually there is something that these states' attorneys generals may be able to sink their teeth into?
Well, one question with the lawsuits is going to be standing. The president has traditionally had a great deal of latitude from the Congress and from the Supreme Court in terms of what's illegal. And I think the president's lawyers may be on solid ground in saying that nothing that he's done is crossing the line. But it's not only the question of conflicts of interest, it's also the question of the appearance thereof. You know, we've never had a president take office in recent memory with a global real estate empire with foreign outposts, let alone a trophy hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue, right in the shadow of the White House.
Right, and he goes to all of his facilities just about every weekend. This weekend, there have been promises that he might show up at wedding receptions. This weekend, he did show up at a wedding reception at one of his hotels.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that he has done since the beginning of his campaign. You know, reporters in his press corps can certainly recall being dragged along to Trump property after Trump property. I mean, I can recall visiting one of his golf courses in Scotland right before the Republican convention, which struck a lot of people as odd. But as you note, I mean, it's something that he has continued during the presidency. He decamps for his golf courses in Virginia and New Jersey all the time. He's brought foreign leaders to Mar-a-Lago, his Florida estate. And it's something that he's done.
I think the dues are up on that at Mar-a-Lago. Didn't I read that they raised the price?
That's correct. I believe that they raised the initiation fee for new members from $100,000 to $200,000.
Okay. How's that not benefiting? Not sure. President Trump's Washington, D.C. hotel issue could be part of a larger ethics issue. Let's bring in contributing editor for New York Magazine, Andrew Rice. His new piece asks the questions, is Trump Inc. the president's greatest vulnerability? And he writes in part this. Even as Republicans like Lindsey Graham started to talk about investigating Trump's finances, it began to occur to many people that the president's defiant refusal to separate himself from his tangle of international business interests might represent something more ominous than mere stubbornness, that his inveterate hucksterism might not be a simple personality quirk or an implausible selling point of a successful campaign, but the fatal weakness of his presidency. Explain.
And the belief of a lot of people that he's in it for the money. He's going to make as much money as he can in office and out of office.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that this is sort of goes to the center of the kind of unprecedented situation that we find ourselves in as a country, and that you know, Trump has not divested his business interests, and you know, the conflicts are real. I mean, there's a recent report in the Wall Street Journal that, or I believe originally in the Daily Caller, that Saudi Arabia spent $270,000 during the transition at this Washington hotel. So that's an example of like a foreign government putting $250,000 into the Trump organization's pockets.
You know, that's actually what I was going to ask you, and also to Alex as well. This $270,000 tab coinciding with a Saudi lobbying push against legislation to allow victims of terrorist attacks to sue foreign governments. That came out of 9/11. You have diplomats from Bahrain, the embassy of Azerbaijan. And Richard, we were talking about this earlier as well, the way the president talks to those nations as compared to our allies. Have either of you ever seen evidence that there are traditional American allies using this hotel? And is there any connection between how the president talks about these various countries and his own business interests?
Well, I think that clearly, there's a lot of evidence, just small things on social media, like the ambassador of Georgia tweeting out a picture of the Trump Hotel and saying, best dining experience I've ever had, etc. These seem like small things, but we know that Trump is, as Norm Eisen, the head of Crew, who is bringing this emoluments lawsuit against the president, put it, he's influenced by these minor forms of tribute, seemingly from the public record. And so, if you're a diplomat, and you have a choice between the Four Seasons and the Trump Hotel, why not stay at the Trump Hotel?
Well, and Alex, you look at the United States' foreign policy. Inexplicably, the president has treated our allies in Europe badly and has embraced tyrants in Turkey and in the Philippines, where two huge Trump properties exist.
That's right. And, not only does it raise questions about why the president is saying and doing the things that he's doing with respect to geopolitical hotspots, but just to answer the previous question, we've also seen powerful domestic interests take an interest in patronizing the president's property. I mean, during the presidential transition, the Heritage Foundation, which is a powerful conservative think tank here in D.C., one of the ones that has perhaps done more than any other to try to shape the Trump administration policies, thank top donors with a gala at the Trump Hotel. We've also seen powerful evangelical interests throw a banquet, put up some very powerful, international clerics at the Trump Hotel. These are all things that ethicists point to as potential cause for concern.
Wow, Richard.
It's unseemly. It has the appearance of conflict of interest. My hunch is, though, you're never going to be able to show quid pro quos. So I don't think ultimately this dog will hunt, but I think it just creates a perception again of an administration that isn't dealing with the White House as, it sounds corny, but as cherished as it is.
Yeah,
this is something. It's an unbelievable responsibility and obligation and honor to be there, and one just senses that there's behavior that's inconsistent with that.
And Steve, what's so remarkable about this is here we are again, 6 months after a campaign, 9 months after a campaign, where we focused on a political candidate who used her position in government to, some people accused her of getting money into their foundation, would change policies. Her husband would go give speeches, and instead of getting his $250,000, once she became Secretary of State, get the $500,000. And I'll be damned if we aren't in a position now where it's the same thing, where, well, how do you prove Secretary Clinton changed U.S. policy? But it did just so happen that Bill Clinton got half a $1,000,000 for giving a 10-minute speech or a 30-minute speech. And here we are at the same thing. How do we prove that these people are going in there? It's just sleazy on both sides.
No, sure.
And it's the same thing.
The stuff that Donald Trump was going after Hillary Clinton for, and the stuff that a lot of Republicans were going after Hillary Clinton for, Republicans who in many cases are silent now, looking at stuff with Donald Trump that's at least often much more glaring. I think the thing with Trump, though, is it's sort of like everything comes back to the election with him. And he got through the campaign not putting out his tax return, sort of thumbing his nose at the ethics crowd on the tax issue, and he feels he got elected and it's vindication. And so this same ethics crowd now comes at him and says you need to divest, you need a blind trust, you need whatever. I think he says to himself, I got away with it in the campaign on taxes, I'll get away with it as president.
Well, and I think Joe brings up a great point about the Clinton practices, which I will say I was kind of alone. I brought it up in real time. I thought that it was sleazy too. And I think that the Clinton practices as it pertains to speeches and the foundation set the precedent for Donald Trump right now. It's really hard to nail Donald Trump on this without dialing it right back to how the Clintons practiced their financial gains and kind of put their grips on a large sector of society through their foundation. By using the same
and as George Stephanopoulos himself said, you give them money because you want to buy access. And
it's disgusting.
If George Stephanopoulos is saying that, foreign leaders were saying that with the Clinton Foundation.
That was a journalist.
By the way, how's the Clinton Foundation doing now that they're out of office?
I don't have the foggiest idea. I mean, I would say that one thing when we're talking about quid pro quos is that you know, there is a subtle difference here with the normal corruption from normal corruption cases, which is that, you know, we're talking about the emoluments clause of the Constitution, which says, you know, there's an absolute prohibition on taking benefits from foreign governments. So you don't actually have to prove that Donald Trump did anything in return for this money. All you have to prove is that that he has been accepting banned emoluments,
well,
that can force.
Wouldn't a judge though have to look at it and see that he's getting more than fair market value? If they build a hotel and people go visit this hotel, you can't get him for that. But if there seems to be a pattern, or if they're emailed, so here we are looking for emails again, or if there's evidence that there's a quid pro quo, that's fine. But if they're getting fair market value for a hotel in Washington, D.C., it becomes difficult again.
That's what Trump's lawyers claim. They make that claim. But actually, the Constitution's wording is pretty definitive. It says that you can't take emoluments of any kind whatever, which basically means it doesn't mean you can't take a profit. It means that you're not supposed to take payments from foreign governments.
But isn't he one step removed? Is it he who is taking? If he basically is one step removed because other people are running the business, doesn't that give him then something of a Chinese wall that protects him from this argument?
Well, he set up something called the Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust, which is, as I say in my story, quite revocable indeed. It seems as if, I mean, as his kids run it, it's not particularly arm's length. So, I mean, I think that's something that ultimately litigation will determine. And this is like why Crew and other organizations that are bringing these suits are enthusiastic about them, because I think they will also give an opportunity for Trump's opponents or ethical advocates to get into his tax returns, to get into the details of his finances.
I think they can get into the tax returns. It's going to be really tough to prove this, just as tough as it was to prove a quid pro quo.
You might see the Russia connection.
The speeches.
All right, you can read Alex's piece in the new issue of Time magazine and Andrew's piece in the new issue of New York magazine. Thank you both.
Thank you guys very much.
And still ahead on Morning Joe, the Democrats struggle to get on the same page. We'll get Steve Kornacki's take on today's New York Times front page piece with the headline, "Deepening Divide Roils Democrats as Base Tilts Left." Also ahead, political battle lines are being redrawn across Europe. Emmanuel Macron's fledgling party is poised for an unbelievable win in France, while Prime Minister Theresa May's future is uncertain in the UK. And as President Trump's comments about London's mayor draws backlash, is the White House considering postponing or canceling an upcoming trip to England? We'll get a live report from London. All that and the very latest developments in the Russia investigation ahead on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.